She told me, if I want to go clubbing with my ex, I will. You don't get a say. That's what freedom is. I said, you're absolutely right. That night, I packed my things, left my key, and vanished. When she came home at 4 a.m. expecting a fight, the only thing waiting for her on the counter was a note that said, enjoy your freedom. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The garlic sizzled as it hit the olive oil, releasing a scent that instantly made the apartment feel like a home. Our home. I stirred the pan, the sun-dried tomatoes softening next to it. It was Chloe's favorite, the pasta arrabbiata from that little Italian place we'd found on our third date. I'd spent an hour getting the sauce just right, a little extra chili flake for kick, the way she loved it. A bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, her preferred brand, sweated in a chiller on the counter. It was a Tuesday, but she'd had a rough day at work, and I wanted to surprise her. I checked my phone. 7:15 p.m. She was late, but that wasn't unusual. Traffic was a nightmare, or maybe her boss had dumped one last task on her desk. I hummed, setting the table for two, placing the napkins just so. I was looking forward to this. To us. The key scratched in the lock at 7:30. I turned from the stove, a smile ready on my face. Hey, you're late. I made dinner. The woman who walked in wasn't the tired, grateful girlfriend I'd pictured. This version of Chloe was a thunderclap of energy. Her hair was freshly curled, falling in perfect waves. She wore a tight, black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, and her heels were already on, making her tower in the doorway. The scent of her expensive perfume hit me before her words did, drowning out the garlic. She barely glanced at me, her focus locked on her phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Oh, yeah, don't wait up. I'm going out. The smile froze on my face. Out? Where? We were supposed to have a quiet night. I made the arrabbiata. She finally looked up, but her eyes were distant, already somewhere else. Mark's in town. Some of the old crew are meeting up at Nexus. The name landed in my gut like a block of ice. Mark. Her ex. The human embodiment of a red sports car. Flashy, loud, and fundamentally unreliable. He had a trust fund and a smirk that suggested he found the whole world mildly amusing, especially people who had to work for a living. My world. Chloe had a history with him that she'd always been vague about, a history that had left her a wreck when he'd finally ghosted her. A history I'd helped her pick up the pieces from. Mark, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Chloe, going clubbing with your ex, that makes me uncomfortable. You know how he is. The way he looks at you. She let out a short, exasperated sigh, the one she reserved for when I was being particularly tedious. God, Alex, don't be so insecure. It's pathetic. A hot flush crept up my neck, but I kept my voice low. It's not about insecurity. It's about respect. For me. For this. I gestured between us, at the table set for two, at the meal going cold on the stove. She laughed then, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. Respect? Respecting what? You're right to tell me what to do. She took a step forward, planting her heels on the polished floor, her gaze challenging and cold. Listen to me clearly. I'm only going to say this once. The air in the room went still. The sizzle of the pan seemed to fade into a distant hum. If I want to go clubbing with my ex, I will. You don't get a say. That's what freedom is. The words hung in the air, absolute and unforgiving. They weren't spoken in heat. They were a declaration, a statement of principle from a sovereign state to a subject. And in that crystalline moment, something inside me broke. Not with a shatter, but with a soft, final click. The confusion, the anxiety, the desperate need to make her understand. It all evaporated. The fog lifted, and I could see everything with a terrifying, peaceful clarity. The love I felt for her didn't vanish. It was simply invalidated. Rendered obsolete by a fundamental truth she had just revealed. She did not value me. I looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect makeup, the dress bought for an occasion I wasn't part of, the utter conviction on her face that she was in the right. And I felt nothing but a vast, quiet acceptance. I nodded slowly. My face was a placid lake. You're absolutely right. My calm, my agreement, was a weapon she had no defense against. Her smug certainty faltered. A flicker of confusion crossed her features, followed by a flash of irritation. I hadn't followed the script. I was supposed to yell, to beg, to prove my insecurity. My serenity was an insult. She recovered quickly, masking her surprise with a dismissive scoff. Whatever. Don't wait up. She turned on her heel, the sound sharp and final, and walked out of our home, out of our life, without a backward glance. The door slammed shut, the vibration echoing through the silent apartment. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing. The scent of ruined pasta filled the air. I walked to the stove, turned off the burner, and placed the lid on the pan. It wasn't a gesture of anger. It was simple tidiness. The chapter was closed. There was no more us. I went to the hall closet and pulled out my large suitcase and a duffel bag. I worked with a methodical, detached efficiency. This wasn't a rage-fueled purge. It was a strategic withdrawal. I opened drawers, folding my clothes with care, selecting only what was mine, what I needed. I left the sweater she'd bought me for my birthday. I left the silly matching pajamas we'd worn last Christmas. Those belonged to the ghost of the man I was 5 minutes ago. I packed my laptop, my important documents from the fireproof box, the watch my grandfather had left me. I took the book I was reading from the nightstand. I was a surgeon, neatly excising myself from a terminal host. When the bags were full, I went to the small desk in the corner and took a single sheet of printer paper. I uncapped a pen. I didn't hesitate. I wrote 3 words in my clean, clear handwriting. Not a goodbye, not an accusation. A simple, factual statement that reflected her own philosophy back at her. Enjoy your freedom. I walked back to the kitchen counter. I placed the note upright, leaning it against the stem of the wine glass I had chilled for her. Then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keychain. With numb fingers, I worked the key to this apartment, her apartment now, off the ring. It made a soft, metallic clink as I set it down on the counter next to the note. I took one last look around. The set table, the cooling pan on the stove, the closed door of the bedroom we'd shared. There was no sadness, only the profound, weightless sensation of a burden being lifted from my shoulders. I picked up my bags, opened the door, and stepped out into the hallway. I closed it softly behind me, not a slam, just a click of finality. I didn't look back. The ghost was already gone. The first thing I did was drive to a 24-hour hotel on the other side of the city. It was a chain, clean and anonymous. The clerk didn't look up from his phone as he handed me the keycard. The room smelled of sterile air and bleach. I dropped my bags by the door, didn't even bother to unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed, the stiff floral bedspread scratchy under my hands, and waited for the feeling to hit me. I waited for the crushing grief, the rage, the seismic tremor of a 2-year life being demolished. It didn't come. Instead, a profound, deafening silence filled the space where all the noise used to be. The noise of her expectations, the constant, low-grade anxiety of not being enough, the background hum of negotiating for basic respect. It was gone, and in its place was peace. It was so quiet I could hear my own heart beating, steady and sure. I lay back on the bed, still in my clothes, and slept for 12 hours straight. It was the most restful sleep I'd had in a year. The next morning, I systematically cut the tethers. I blocked her number. I blocked her on every social media app. It wasn't an act of anger. It was digital hygiene, like deleting a malicious file. I called my boss, told him I had a family emergency and needed to work remotely for the rest of the week. He was understanding. I didn't feel like I was lying. This was an emergency. The emergency was saving myself. The days bled into a week. I found a realtor and leased a small, bright 1-bedroom apartment with a view of a quiet courtyard. It had no history, no ghosts. I bought a new bed, new sheets. I set up my desk by the window. The silence there wasn't empty. It was fertile. I started going to the gym at 6 a.m., the brutal burn of iron and sweat scouring the last remnants of her from my system. I reread my favorite sci-fi novels. I cooked simple meals for one and didn't set the table. I was rediscovering the contours of my own life, and I found I liked the shape of it. I was at a coffee shop, typing away on my laptop, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, the notification popped up. Curiosity, that old poison, got the better of me. I put in my headphones and listened. Her voice was sharp, tinged with irritation, as if I were a child who had misplaced her car keys. Alex? What the hell? Where are you? I come home, and all your stuff is, just call me. This isn't funny. I deleted the voicemail. The knot loosened. She wasn't hurt or remorseful. She was inconvenienced. 3 days later, a text from a different number lit up my screen. Unknown number. Okay, I get it. You're making a point. You can come back now. We can talk about this like adults. I stared at the message. Come back now. As if she was summoning a dog that had strayed too far. There was no I'm sorry. No, I was a monster. Just a royal decree that my protest was noted and could now cease. I didn't reply. The act of not replying felt more powerful than any argument I could have ever won. The following week, my phone rang. It was Jess, a friend we shared, though she was always more Chloe's than mine. I considered letting it go, but I felt a need to draw a line in the sand for anyone who might try to cross it. I answered. Jess. Alex, hey. Her voice was strained, faux concern layered over clear annoyance. Look, I just got off the phone with Chloe. She's a mess. She says you just left. No warning, nothing. What's going on? I said nothing, letting the silence press against her. She filled it, her tone turning accusatory. What you did was really cruel, you know. You can't just ghost someone like that after 2 years. It's emotionally abusive. Cruel. The word echoed in my mind. I had given Chloe exactly what she asked for. I had granted her the ultimate freedom, and in doing so, I had claimed my own. And I was the cruel one. Jess, I said, my voice flat and calm. There's nothing to discuss. But I ended the call. I didn't need to justify my freedom to one of her subjects. I blocked her number 2. The karma arrived not with a bang, but through a whisper. A guy I knew from the gym, Mike, who was tangentially connected to Mark's circle, sidled up to me while I was re-racking weights. Hey man, he said, wiping his brow. Heard you, and Chloe called it quits. I simply nodded, adding another plate to the leg press. Rough deal, he continued, a little awkwardly. Especially with how it went down with that tool Mark. I kept my expression neutral, but I listened. Yeah, apparently he was just in town for a weekend, wanted an easy hookup. Told his boys Chloe was convenient and nostalgic. Soon as he got what he wanted Sunday morning, he bounced. Ghosted her harder than you did, from what I hear. Mike let out a low whistle. She's been posting some seriously sad stuff online. Guess her freedom came with a hefty price tag. I finished my set, the muscles in my legs burning with a clean, honest pain. I felt nothing for her. No schadenfreude, no pity. It was just data. A predictable outcome for a poor investment. Her grand act of defiance, her claim to autonomy, had boiled down to being a convenient booty call for a man who saw her as a living monument to his own ego. She had traded a man who would have walked through fire for her for a man who wouldn't even return her text. I thanked Mike for the spot, and as I walked out of the gym into the crisp evening air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The last thread, the one of wondering what if, had been severed. She had unraveled completely, and I was finally, truly, free. The middle was over. The rise had begun. 6 months to the day after I vanished, I was sitting in a sun-drenched cafe, sketching designs for a new client on my tablet. The coffee was rich, the music was good, and the weight I had been carrying for years was a distant memory. I was, for the first time in a long time, genuinely happy. Not the performative happiness of a staged photo, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from within. My phone, face up on the table, lit up with a number I didn't recognize. The area code was the same. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned by 2 years of chaos, tensed. But the new me, the one who had built a life on a foundation of peace, felt only a detached curiosity. I swiped to answer, my voice calm and neutral. Hello. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then, a trembling, fragile voice I hadn't heard since that night. Alex, oh my God, you answered. It was Chloe. Her voice was a wreck, stripped of all its former arrogance. It was raw and small. Please, I need to see you. I was so stupid. Mark, he was nothing. You were everything. What I said, I didn't mean it. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was perfectly bitter, perfectly warm. I think you did, I said, my tone even, as if stating a simple fact of physics. No, the word was a desperate plea. I was testing you. Or I was scared. I don't know. Please, can we just meet? I'm at my apartment. It's so empty without you. Testing you. The words were like a key clicking in a lock, revealing the entire, manipulative mechanism. She had seen our relationship as a series of tests, and I had just failed the final one by refusing to play the game. I'm busy, Chloe, I said, my gaze drifting to the sketch on my tablet. A clean, elegant design for a future I was building for myself. Busy? With what? The fragility in her voice began to crack, revealing the steel of entitlement beneath. This is more important than us. After everything, there is no us, I stated, the finality in my voice absolute. There hasn't been for 6 months. The dam broke. The pleading vanished, replaced by the sputtering rage of someone who was being denied a script they believed was theirs by divine right. So what, that's it? After 2 years, you just run away? You're a coward, Alex. You didn't even have the balls to fight for me. You just packed your little bags and snuck out in the night like a thief. I let her words hang in the air, giving them the silence they deserved. They were meant to wound, but they bounced off the armor of my indifference. She was screaming into a void. When I spoke again, my voice was lower, flatter than before. It wasn't angry. It was final. It was the sound of a judge reading a verdict that had been decided long ago. You told me you wanted freedom from my opinion. I began, each word measured and clear. I granted it. You told me I didn't get a say, so I stopped having one. About you, about US, about any of it. The moment you walked out that door, you became a stranger to me. And I don't waste energy on strangers. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end, a storm of impotent fury and shattered pride. Don't contact me again. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I simply set it back on the table, the screen going dark. I took another sip of coffee. It was still perfectly warm. I turned back to my sketch. The world had not shifted on its axis. It had remained perfectly, blessedly steady. A week later, I was meeting Sarah for coffee. Sarah, who I'd met at a gallery opening a month prior. Sarah, who was sharp, kind, and whose eyes held a quiet confidence that had never needed to belittle anyone else. We were at the same cafe, laughing about a terrible movie we'd both seen, when the bell on the door chimed. Chloe walked in. She looked diminished. The vibrant, clubbing dress was replaced with faded jeans and a sweatshirt. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She was alone. Her gaze swept the room and landed on me. For a split second, hope, raw and desperate, flared in her eyes. Then she saw Sarah. She saw the easy way we were leaning towards each other. She saw the genuine, unforced smile on my face, a smile she hadn't seen in years. She saw the way Sarah listened, her head tilted, her laughter soft and real. Our eyes met across the room. I held her gaze for less than a second. There was no recognition in mine, no anger, no smug victory. It was the same look I'd give a barista I'd never seen before, or someone who'd held the door open. A blank, polite, non-recognition. She was a background character in my life, an extra who had wandered onto the wrong set. I turned back to Sarah, seamlessly picking up our conversation where it had left off. So, as I was saying, the cinematography was the only good part. From the periphery of my vision, I saw Chloe's face collapse. The hope shattered, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. She wasn't the villain in my story anymore. She wasn't the one who got away. She was a footnote, an irrelevant detail from a previous chapter. I was so completely, utterly moved on that her presence was nothing more than a minor spatial anomaly. She stood there, frozen for a moment, the weight of her own irrelevance pressing down on her. Then, she turned and hurried back out the door, the bell chiming softly behind her. I didn't watch her go. I was already looking forward, my focus entirely on the woman in front of me, on the design on my tablet, on the life I had built, a life where the only freedom that mattered was my own. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.